Hey, it's Sam, and I'm making this video about something very important in astrology, and that's the planetary order and how we look at one planet moving to the next planet as an evolutionary force. And in particular, as I'm recording this in August of 2017, actually right after the eclipse that just happened in Leo, I'm looking at some very interesting social trends and how they're playing out astrologically with the different planets, and in particular the theme of the planetary order becomes very important, particularly the order from Mars to Mercury and even Jupiter. These three planets from Mars to Mercury to Jupiter and the activating forces they represent are really huge, and they show a great evolution of what we're willing to fight for, being elevated and being connected to something that's actually worth fighting for, rather than just defending our sort of ego and our programmed responses. And so this quality of Mars in particular, which is the willingness to fight and to defend a principle and a concept that we think is worth fighting for, must be eventually elevated and channeled toward, again, something that's worth the unpleasantness and the stress. Because again, the cruel planets, which are Mars and Saturn primarily, also the Sun, have the capacity and the desire and the willingness and ability to get in there and do things that are hard. So it doesn't mean they're bad. It means they do things that are unpleasant. And fighting for something it's not fun. It's not Venus, which enjoys, pleasure and enjoys other people, or Mercury, which likes to have fun. It's saying, okay, even though this is going to be hard, I'm willing to do it because it's right. I'm willing to defend what's right. And we all have a line that we draw, and we need to. Okay, we need to be able to say this is wrong and this is right, and be willing to get in there and defend it. Otherwise, we wind up not having good boundaries. We wind up compromising too much, like let's say even in a personal relationship where we're always the one who gives in, and then we eventually don't feel like we're respected or appreciated. But it's up to us to define what we're willing to defend and how to use that energy appropriately rather than just indiscriminately and even destructively. And so, like for instance, when Mars is weak, you could say even stereotypically, like, let's say, debilitated. I don't like to just make it that, but you can use the debilitation and exaltation points as a good archetype. When it's, let's say it's in Cancer, or it's that Cancer sort of archetype, then we're very emotional and thin-skinned about what we're willing to fight about. Like anything that disagrees with us, like, well, wait a minute, you said this, I don't agree with it, so I'm going to fight with you. And it doesn't even matter what it is. You'll see that the archetype, and again, it doesn't mean if you have Mars in Cancer, I'm saying the archetype is thin-skinned, because Cancer doesn't have boundaries. Cancer is where we're trying to merge, where we're trying to, be open. And the quality of Mars that just fights based on impulse and emotion and reaction is not good. You don't do martial arts angry and upset. A great martial artist is cool, and they're strategic, like Mars in Capricorn, for example, where we've contemplated what we're going to say, and we're strategic about our fight, and we're willingness to get in there and endure the hardship and to learn from our mistakes, to learn from the willfulness and destruction that we're about to bring on when we start to fight and argue, for example. This is why Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Because we become strategic and we learn from our mistakes, and we learn to choose our battles more wisely and to be thorough and to not be emotional. Not to fight because our feelings are hurt, for example, but to go, okay, I can absorb that, not to be triggered and easily baited and easily coerced and co-opted into a fight, you know, for example. So the planet that comes after Mars and that allows us to really learn from that indiscriminate, you know, swinging at every windmill that comes our way, which is kind of the Mars gone crazy, where we just fight any battle, is Mercury. Because Mercury comes after Mars and shows where we bring more discrimination, more intelligence, more humor, more thoughtfulness, where we say, you know what, maybe I was wrong there. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe my words and my ideas that I was defending weren't even my own. Maybe I was just defending my bloodline and heritage and culture that I was raised in, for example, because we all inherit a certain value system and we wind up first defending that. And then eventually, as we begin to develop our own value system, we start to question the one that we were raised in, and we start to say, how much of that is actually me and how much of that did I just inherit? And this goes on and on and on, even for spiritual people who maybe start to evolve beyond the training of their childhood and the values of their family and bloodline that they are defending. They might even go into ashrams, and then this is the thing, okay, this is the right thing, you know, yoga and whatever, now I'm willing to defend this. Then we even question that. Why am I defending this? Or are these people right? And this is what Mercury does. Mercury questions everything. Even all of our sacred cows, which is actually the Jupiter stuff that we actually believe. Mercury questions all of it. Mercury is really important. He's in between Mars and Jupiter. Because the planetary order, by the way, is Sun, Moon, which are actually very high level. Sun is Supreme Self, Paramatman, non-localized Self. Moon is Jiva, and the experience of the experience of our pure self on the field of consciousness, and it shows the karmas that go with us from lifetime to lifetime, the Jiva. But then once we incarnate as a separate person, a separate animal, a lot of the other planets, become very important in the sense of the succession. First we're Mars, this is me, individual, you know, defending my programming, defending my karma, which the karma actually comes from the Moon in the Jiva. Then Mars first, you know, comes out and just defends it. Then Mercury brings more intelligence and discrimination to sort of question it. Then Jupiter tries to elevate that information gathering of Mercury so it's towards something higher and not just stimulating. And then Venus tries to connect that with people, and then Saturn sort of makes peace with the whole kind of, you know, matrix of life and death on Earth. A sort of quick romp through the planetary order very quickly. But this transition from Mars, which is our programmed, it's like the programmed animal. The animal responds to defend. The reason we're programmed to defend is because we're trying to survive. We're programmed to survive first and to fight and defend something that's different on the animal level. This is why Mars is a tamasic energy, because it's trying to survive. And again, if we're just living through the level of ego, and if Mars is at a low vibration, we're sensing a threat where there is not really a threat. It's a threat to our ego, and then Mars is just defending this kind of thin-skinned emotion rather than something higher and virtuous. So Mercury comes and brings more intelligence and discrimination. Then Jupiter tries to connect that with a higher picture. Then Mars starts to defend those Jupiter principles. Because this is actually what Mars is defending. Mars is defending Jupiter at that point. Jupiter defines what's worth defending. See, Mercury just brings variety that says, well, what about this? What about this? And we start gathering a lot of information. And then Jupiter connects that information with some philosophy. It doesn't mean it's a good philosophy. It's just a philosophy. Maybe the philosophy is, you know, yoga and spirituality or some religion, or maybe it's something like white supremacy. It's also a philosophy, and it's also something that people defend. Here in the United States recently, again, as I record this in August 2017, we see these issues playing out in stark reality. Right before the eclipse on August 21st, a lot of the themes in the United States really revolved around these things, including our leaders and whatnot. But we see the sort of shadow play of morality and what's right. Some people say what's right is, you know, all this political correctness, what's wrong with these statues? It's our history, it's our heritage. And it's this oversensitivity to people like Antifa, who are, you know, let's say, extreme left, you know, extreme leftists who try to, you know, some may say, suppress harsh right speech, like people who want more nationalism or whatever. Certainly, you saw these protests where the leftist protesters were protesting against, like, the KKK and white nationalism and fascists and Nazis and whatnot. And this whole thing erupted, and there was even a leftist protester who was killed. Again, this is a real clash of what are we defending? How much discrimination is in our ideas? What is the principle and the philosophy that's guiding our willingness to defend? What are we defending, and how much are we willing to suffer and even die for our causes? And again, when Mars is powerful, we have relentless courage to not be deterred from the fight that needs to be fought. And in particular, I'll just say of note with the recent eclipse, because it's going to have a lot of effect for a while. You know, it'll have lasting effect. It also happened in the nakshatra of Magha, which has to do with the Pitris and the divine ancestors. Notice the quality of ancestry, even in that fight, that has to do with, you know, the Confederacy and all of these things in that would be our forefathers. You know, but there are other fights going on, and you should be, you know, noticing them. And people willing to defend, you know, sacred teachings, and willing to get in there and fight to defend it. And other people's reactions and responses, and, you know, to those arguments, and how much intelligence and discrimination is being brought to those kind of discussions. You should notice. You should notice and pay attention now to these themes that are played out. And particularly, you know, like right now, the internet is very related to Mercury in its benefit and its detriment. You know, again, and I've been saying this for years, and it's not even related to any specific situation of these days now, but I've been saying it for years, that we live in the information age, but also the misinformation age, and the age of distraction, the age of confusion, and the age where we've lost a lot of discrimination, where, you know, the guy in his basement with a lot of YouTube followers is seen just as authoritative as someone who has, you know, or the entire history of a certain tradition or anything else. And in fact, this is the era that we live in, where, in fact, it's even easier to be seduced by bad information because it might be sexier because of the personality, whereas true scholarship and, you know, learning something is difficult. It's hard. I know for myself, I've had certification courses. I've been doing them for years. It gets harder and harder. I mean, it gets harder and harder to keep people's attention for the entire time. You know, remarkably, we still get a lot of graduates. Last year, my certification course, we had 50 graduates, 85 started. But I notice how it's harder and how harder it is over time to keep people focused. Because again, there's a point where it's extremely enjoyable to be learning astrology, particularly how it actually really works, and taking all of that enthusiasm of Mars aligned with the higher principles of Jupiter, like, yes, I want to learn this, and I'm excited to learn this. And then the fun and enjoyment of Mercury, which is the first part of, let's say, the course, but then when it starts to get more detail and it requires more effort, people start wanting to tune out. And then instead of Mercury staying with it and actually figuring out and working through that kind of learning curve, which we used to do very easily, now we gravitate toward the next stimulating thing. Oh, this will be more stimulating and fun. And Mercury, again, it can also come and undermine our, the true teachings. So this conduit of Mercury is being between Mars and the things we're willing to enthusiastically jump in and actually defend, and Jupiter, which are the things that are worth defending, and the true teachings, authentic teachings, real teachings, which require effort, and which require a lot of discrimination and staying with it, and not being seduced by trivia or distracted, because again, Mercury is very distracting. It's very distracted, easily distracted. And in this day and age, You can see it certainly online with astrology these days. You know, YouTube experts everywhere. But how much of it is actually really authoritative? You have to be careful, because it's harder to like get in there and like work through the actual teaching. Sometimes it's harder to do. And again, it doesn't seem as fun or sexy or as edgy. Again, we see a lot of this now. Even, I mean, just look at, it's like the world is upside down on some level. The whole world kind of got it wrong, like the phenomena of electing Trump and like what all that means and all of this thing that's come out as a result. We've really seen how things called fake news. Well, what news is actually fake? Part of the fake news is the fact that you're saying things are fake news, or this whole kind of illusion around what's true is really big right now. And all of this transit of Rahu that went through Leo, again, as I record this in August 2017, it showed a lot of these themes. And so this evolution of what we're willing to fight for, the courage to fight, the willingness to actually fight a good fight that's based on good information and that's actually connected to higher principles is a big theme right now in our world and in our life. And you should pay attention and notice how these things are playing out, because what's about to happen is Mars is about to go into Leo, and we're again about to see this sort of willingness to stand for whatever it is that's right and true. And it's about to go into Magha, which is, again, it's about the divine ancestry, about the traditions, and how much people are willing to step up and be inconvenienced. Because again, this is the nature of Mars. Is the highest quality of Mars is, again, to have the courage to turn our, fighting nature onto our own weaknesses and our own shortcomings, rather than project it out and saying, you're the thing that's making me weak. You're the one that's making me weak, so I'm going to fight with you. It's where we say, I'm weak because I can't endure the difficulty and the hardship of having my state of mind hijacked by anything that disagrees with me. So when we're fighting to preserve the ego, then we're in turmoil. And we just saw Mars go through the debilitated sign of Cancer. It's still in that sign of debilitation, and we see these emotional fights. But we had the eclipse in Magha, which is very much about defending the sacred traditions, and Mercury in the sky, as I say, as I record this in August 2017, Mercury is retrograde, and they're going to join in Leo and bring together this hopefully a higher level of discrimination and scholarship in the sacred arts and sciences, and hopefully some cooperation around these divisive dynamics politically and whatnot, even that we've seen played out in the United States. This is where I live, and I know they're played out in other places in the world. Feel free to comment to let me know, but it's been a huge thing, particularly where our president comes out and creates, again, this moral equivalence. Again, this is a big problem. Like, everything is the same. Everything is the same. If you do it this way, if you do it that way, these people who represent like hardly 0% of the population are just as valid as these ones who are protesting against it. It's all the same. And again, you see this in a lot of different situations. For example, for example, I've been talking about the sidereal zodiac in India, which has been the tradition of Indian astrology for thousands of years. Again, it's the same kind of thing, like the moral equivalence, you might say, or the equivalence of how many people actually use that relative to ones who don't. And like, well, it's all the same. You say that, he says that. Who knows? Like, well, we do know. We do know. We have a tradition. And we know how many people have done this. It's not like, well, I don't know. This sort of confusion around, again, we do know. We understand. And so this is these are the signs of our times. And this whole like illusion around the internet, and again, that everyone is an expert if they have a lot of YouTube followers or a lot of this or that, or who knows. So don't be confused. Don't be confused. And this is what eclipses do. They confuse us, but they also illuminate energies that are very deep. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the energies that are deep, what we're willing to confront, what we're actually exposing, what's actually being exposed. And these are the things that get transformed during eclipses. And you'll see, hopefully, representatives of the truth emerge. Like we'll see the truth of maybe what's really in our president's heart, or what's really behind this teaching, or what's really going on here or there. So just be alert to that. This is just what we see happening right now, played out in the sky. We see this as the evolution from Mars, which is what we're defending, a kind of programmed sort of defense of something, to Mercury, which brings in a lot more variety and, well, maybe this, maybe I was wrong, maybe I need to say this, maybe I need to go back, especially when Mercury's retrograde. We go back and reckon with things and go, maybe I need to clean that up, maybe I need to apologize, maybe I need to reflect on that. That's what Mercury retrograde is about, where things come our way that we can reflect on. I said this in a video a few days ago. And in this way, we connect with something, we connect with teachings and principles that are actually right, that are righteous, that are in line with the traditions, and that are worth defending. And however that resonates with us. And it doesn't mean everybody has to use the same tradition or whatever. Or that just because you're not doing something in harmony with the tradition, you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean any of that. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that people who do something that's not just in the tradition are wrong, or making mistakes, or doing things. I'm actually talking about the energy of this sort of protests that we see, and the sort of equivalence where we're not sure what's going on. Again, people who have really worked through things and really know what they're doing, then they know what they're doing. But I'm saying a lot of us who are watching other things where we're not really sure, this, that, I don't know, is it this way or that way? Look into, the real, themes behind the issues. Like, it might be easy to say, well, what's the big deal with these statues? I mean, they're just statues. God, look at these people protesting a statue. I mean, this is just American history. That's a valid point until you consider, Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee were people who fought to keep slaves, and they were, at least bigoted in their own way. And again, just like you don't walk around in Germany with statues of Hitler or Goebbels. People that sent people to the, to the gas chamber. It's easy, especially like, let's say for white people, to say, well, what's the big deal? Well, it's not a big deal to you. They weren't trying to exterminate you. They were trying to enslave you. They didn't perpetuate a group called the Klan. And so if you're a black person, or you're immigrant, or you're someone who is not even Jewish or whatever, maybe you would respond to that a little differently. So again, these are all themes to consider right now after the eclipse, and as we move forward. Again, these eclipses have big impact, and particularly since Mars is about to go right over that eclipse point, it's a big focus on the Petries, the divine ancestors, the ancestry, the lineage, whether they're cultural, whether they're spiritual, whether they're in your family. Look at your family histories, and again, the programming that you got from your family. Huge, huge stuff. This is the first thing that we grow up defending. We grew up in a family, and we were put in a role, and we were like, oh, you're the smart one, so yeah, you're always right. Now go defend everything, or whatever our programming was that we got. Many of us don't evolve beyond this kind of, it's hard for us sometimes to evolve beyond a certain reactionary stature, where we just react, or we're used to doing that, or we're used to maybe not reacting, maybe being afraid of our voice. Whatever it is. Mars is often too much or too little. It takes a while to get a handle on it. We get a handle on it because we're thinking in different ways, which is Mercury. Again, now that Mercury's retrograde in the sky, we're more introspective about those things. And this leads to Jupiter, where we're not just gathering information, but we're aligning that information with a purpose. Interesting times, transformative times. Use your discrimination, particularly in the Mercury retrograde phase, and get ready for Mars going into Leo, where we could be really enthusiastically, needing to defend ourselves and needing to defend the truth, and willing to do it, kindly, compassionately, and with, with intelligence and with good information, not with just, again, swinging at every windmill and ready to just fight because somebody dared disagree with us or whatever would be the dysfunctional quality of that Mars. We've seen quite a bit of it as Mars has gone through Cancer. Leo, the king is on the throne, or I'm sorry, the general is on the throne, so he's ready to defend the righteous teachings, and I hope to see you there. And by the way, if you're interested in actually learning astrology and studying, check out my certification course, because again, I've been training astrologers, you know, usually 50 to 100 astrologers a year in the level 1 course. At any given time, it's usually more than 100 students of level 1 and level 2. They go on to do great work. You see the program is very structured, starts from the beginning, takes you through. These are 9-month professional level training courses, and we're now at that sort of small window each year where we're registering people. So if you're seeing this and it's still available, go ahead and follow the link and check it out.